Good afternoon, everyone. We do have a few more joining us, but in the interest of time, we will go ahead and get started as people start to jump on and join us. On behalf of the Chamber, Newcastle County Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Development Center of Delaware, and Green Street USA, I'd like to welcome you today as we discuss a very timely and important topic. When the SBDC reached out to me about this opportunity, I immediately wanted to jump on it, as we know how important it is for organizations to be sustainable, not only from an environmental perspective, but from a risk and diversity, inclusion, and equity perspectives as well. We have three world-class speakers with us today, and we do mean that literally, as they are joining us from around the world. And at the end, we will share details on a program offered by Green Street USA to help your business with its sustainability efforts. A program that the SBDC is also offering a $500 stipend to chamber members to help support. This event is being recorded and will be shared later today to all registrants, along with the slides for your ease. As we go, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and they will be addressed at the end. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Joel Fishman from Green Street USA. Joel?
Hi, thanks, Jamie. Hi, I'm Joel, co-founder of Green Street USA. Like most of you, I guess, I've been a small business person most of my life. In my case, professional office, retail, real estate, entrepreneurship, a whole bunch of stuff. And about a year ago, I realized that the world was coming to an inflection point with regard to sustainability. And I began to think about how small and medium-sized enterprises could rise to this moment that the corporations were getting more and more on top of. The data is pouring in and people want change. To cite one of many statistics you can find out there, a giant hair care company recently found in a survey that 73% of consumers plan to be more sustainable in 2021. 73%, think about that. When inflection points arrive, things move fast. That's why I teamed up with Alan Horowitz, formerly of Microsoft and of AstraZeneca, to start Green Street USA, and why we want to share some insights today. Main Street's important to all of us. We want to see you guys thrive in the future, and make no mistake about it, the future is here. So let's roll up our sleeves and have a great webinar. Alan? Great,
thank you, Joel. And thank you to Danita and Jamie for supporting this program. It really is very timely and critical. And we hope that we can leave you with a number of key insights, tips, and ideas for moving forward. As Joel said, we founded Green Street USA for the sole purpose of helping small and medium-sized enterprises embrace sustainability. I've been doing that throughout my career, working with larger businesses to embed sustainability into their DNA. And the opportunity to do that for smaller and medium-sized enterprises is just really rewarding to me. And we look forward to this webinar. Again, thank you to the Small Business Development Center and the Chamber for supporting us. I'm going to turn this over to our three global experts in a moment, but I want to just take a couple minutes to say a few things about sustainability and just contextualize this webinar and the issue overall. As Jamie said, the concept of sustainability is broad. Often we think about it in terms of environmental protection, climate change, and it of course is that. We must ensure collectively that we have a healthy planet and that we're using our natural resources efficiently and responsibly, absolutely. But it's much more than that. It's about embracing business ethics. It's about ensuring our employees have a safe, healthy, and supportive place to work. And it's about building resilience and creating a diverse and inclusive workforce. And in short, it's about all of us embracing our collective environmental and social responsibilities to protect our future. So I'll close with the sustainability concept with this. My favorite definition of sustainability of a sustainable business is the following. It's one that is committed to being around for the long term and deservedly so. In our Green Street USA program, and we'll talk about what our program entails later on, is about helping that community of small and medium-sized businesses embrace that commitment. So the topics we've chosen today, and we could have chosen any number of specific sustainability topics, are, I think, very timely and relevant to us as we look to emerge from the pandemic, see a light at the end of the tunnel, and refocus our businesses on what long-term success looks and feels like. So the three experts, and I'm going to introduce the three of them now, and then I'll turn it over to John to begin. But the first topic is risk and resilience, because the pandemic reminds us that the unexpected can happen, and that business survival, let alone growth, depends on our ability to foresee these risks, take steps to mitigate them, and maximize our ability to bounce back. John is a world-class expert. We worked together at AstraZeneca. He essentially wrote the book on risk management at AZ, and no one is better positioned than John to walk you through at a practical level what risk and resilience looks like in this context. The second topic, energy efficiency. Every business, of course, big and small, in every sector, is in a position to save money and help protect our climate through energy efficiency. Climate change is, in many respects, the sustainability issue of our day. It's all over the news for good reason. Our employees, our customers, our planet need us to take action. And we have Julie Hughes with us, who's the Director of Programs at the Institute for Market Transformation. It's a nonprofit organization based in DC that has been working with small businesses and governments for years to drive energy efficiency, and also help landlords and tenants work together to find common solutions for our energy challenge and the climate change predicament. The third, but certainly not least, topic we'll talk to you about today is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also a critical element of sustainability, because businesses that look like their community, that recognize that a diverse workforce is a creative, energetic, and attractive workforce, are businesses that will succeed, that will grow, that will thrive, and that will be embraced by their customers and their broader community. And we're really thrilled to have with us Stacey Halliday here today. No one is in a better position to talk to you about this topic than she is. She's an environmental attorney who happens to be in Thailand at the moment, but she's based in DC. She worked in the Obama administration and is truly a globally recognized expert on environmental justice and this topic of diversity and inclusion. And we're thrilled to have all three of our speakers. I'll come back at the end with a bit more about Green Street, just a couple logistics. I believe you're all on mute. I'll be monitoring the chat room for questions. We'll address those questions at the end, unless there's something compelling that I feel like we need to tackle right away. But otherwise, I'll see you back for the Q&A after our subject matter experts. So with that, I'll turn it to John. John?
Okay, thanks, Alan, and hello to everybody on the call. So this will be a 10-minute take on my thoughts on some risk and resilience fundamentals and how applying them can make your business more sustainable. So to start, how do you define risk? Well, for me, and simply put, risks are things that haven't happened yet, but if they did, they potentially could have an impact on your business. Now, people mostly think of risks as threats, whereas in fact, they could also be opportunities for your business to improve performance, increase revenue, or perhaps grow market share. So the impacts can be both positive or negative. And then resilience, that talks to how well your business could bounce back after a serious event has happened. And I'll give some examples shortly. Now, many people consider that practicing good risk and resilience management takes a lot of effort, something that larger listed companies have to do. But integrating risk management into your day-to-day business activities doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming. And it doesn't take much to get significant benefit for a small amount of work or input. So, Julie, perhaps if we could move to the first slide, or the next slide. So, natural disasters are one example of extremely serious risks. And you can hopefully see on the screen pictures from Hurricane Harvey, one as it approaches land and one that captures the devastating impact that can be typical for a hurricane of this severity. FEMA research shows that a staggering 40% of small businesses never reopen their doors after a disaster such as this, and another 25% fail in the first year after. There are, however, some good examples of how to deal with such an event. So Hurricane Harvey hit Texas in, I think, August 2017. Something like 40 inches of rain fell in 4 days. and the storm caused more than $125 billion worth of damage. Many small businesses were devastated by the hurricane, but one company didn't. It was a small marketing agency, and despite having their offices flooded so badly when Lake Houston overflowed that nobody could enter the building for 3 months, when the staff finally came back, the building wasn't able to be occupied. But during this period, their operations were hardly affected. And that's because the company had foreseen the event and established continuity plans to deal with it, one of which was to keep most of its data stored in the cloud. And that allowed its staff to work remotely through the storm and after. And even with the office closed, they never lost access to their critical records and documents. If they hadn't done that, the business might not have recovered like many of the others. Interestingly, and I know a lot of the attendees on the call are from the Delaware area, it's perhaps worth noting that a greater proportion of Delaware's land area is at risk of coastal flooding, more so than any of the other lower states, perhaps except for Florida and Louisiana. So this is definitely something worth thinking about. More recently, the COVID pandemic is another stark reminder that these unexpected things can and do happen. Pandemics, natural disasters, supply chain disruptions, and so on. So in terms of resilience, businesses that are fragile can often be badly damaged by these events, with many struggling to survive. On the other hand, businesses with solid foundations in terms of their financials and perhaps a good customer base can often limit the impact from the arrival of these major risks and bounce back, even potentially stronger than before. And recently, I've seen a number of examples of businesses rapidly changing their operating model to drive greater online sales as a result of being forced to close their high street premises as a result of the many lockdowns that we've all experienced through this recent pandemic. But natural disasters are just one type of risk. So perhaps, Julie, if we could go to the next slide. It's also important to remember that business-threatening disasters can take many forms, and it's not always a destructive natural disaster. In fact, it's far more common to experience disaster from the inside, events that could hurt your productivity or damage your IT infrastructure, your information and management systems, perhaps internal supply chains, or perhaps issues with your people. And these risks can be just as disruptive to your operations. I normally categorize risks into these 3 buckets you can see on the screen: strategic, operational, compliance, and regulatory. Some examples of strategic risks could relate to what your competitors are doing, perhaps, delivery of new initiatives or programs, including any restructuring that you've got going on, perhaps development of strategic partnerships, and also thinking externally, perhaps changes in the political and social landscape could be bringing more risk, or the way your customer behavior is changing. On the operational side, things like service delivery, supply chain, people management, information systems again, and assets and equipment management can all bring disruption. And of course, things like the hurricane, natural disasters, fires, and floods. On the compliance and regulatory side, I'm sure you'll be aware of all the relevant compliance and regulatory risks to your business, things around health and safety, environmental management, and data privacy in relation to customer information. But coming back to the opportunity side of things, a strong positive focus in some of these areas can really drive your credentials and profile and reputation in the sustainability arena going forward, as well as complying with the regulation and rules. So, Julie, if we could perhaps go on to the next slide. So my top tips: what does good practice look like for risk and resilience management? But at the top, it's important to say up front that these activities do not have to be complicated or take a lot of effort. There are some simple tools and regular agenda items that can be weaved seamlessly into day-to-day activities, which will go a long way to mitigating risk, build opportunity, and strengthen your business's resilience. So for me, the top tips are, well, firstly, it's about anticipation. Anticipate the things that could impact your business. Think of what could go wrong and what would the impact be in terms of revenue, costs, or reputation. And then prioritize the top or most critical risks for taking action. There are some simple tools here that can help you. Things like a risk category checklist. A checklist can help making sure that you cover all your business's relevant risks. A risk register can help you track and keep on top of your threats and opportunities, a simple list. And then establishing some assessment criteria can help you prioritize the risks that you identify. Now, these criteria will be dependent on the individual characteristics of your business, its size and shape, but they can help with the prioritization process to decide which are the most critical risks that you need to take action on. And then point 2 is taking that action. Take steps to minimize, reduce, avoid, or perhaps transfer through insurance where feasible, the critical risks. There's no point in just identifying the risks if you don't take steps to remediate or mitigate them. Smart action plans can help. Logs in your risk register make sure they're not just a paper exercise, and establishing ownership and accountability are critical. Who owns the risk and who owns the improvement plan? And then on the third point, it's often not possible to fully mitigate a risk, such as a hurricane. You can take steps to mitigate it, but you can't fully prevent it. So it's establishing those continuity plans to allow business to recover rapidly after a major event has taken place. Things like having an emergency response plan in place. This would support the real-time management during and in the immediate aftermath of an unexpected event, such as a flood or a hurricane. Crisis management plans. These can anticipate and help guide interactions with customers, regulators, and other key stakeholders that your business has should the unspeakable occur. And then continuity plans themselves. These will be the actions and activities that will support you maintaining your essential business operations in the face of disruption, such as the backup IT data storage arrangements that we heard about with the hurricane example. And then establish an appropriate cycle for review that makes sense for your business. I'd recommend building it into your existing activities and don't create a new, complete, separate process for this. And also, don't forget that risk can also be an opportunity to drive your business forward, and that risk and opportunity often go hand in hand. Thinking it from the other side, what can stop your company from being resilient? Well, the key point is mindset and thinking this just can't happen to us. Instead, identify your risks, think through scenarios, review your insurance, build strong relationships within the community with community leaders, and develop those plans. There's no secret sauce to resilience. It's just a matter of thinking ahead and managing your risks. Plan for success, but prepare for the unexpected. So in summary, the best defense is to embed these steps as part of your natural way of doing business, the way you naturally think. In short, always consider the what ifs and what can go wrongs, assess how they could impact your business, and consider what could be best done to prevent, minimize, or continuity plan for those particular risks. Or indeed, if they're an opportunity, what could be done to ensure that that opportunity is in fact delivered. So thanks for listening. I'll stop here, but I'll be happy to answer any questions in the plenary session. But for now, I'll pass on to Julie, who's going to talk to us about sustainability in the context of energy and climate.
Thank you. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Thanks. Well, great. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to share some tips and suggestions for everyone on how you might approach energy efficiency in your spaces, particularly working with your landlord, operating under the assumption that many of you rent the space that you're in. It's always a good time for energy efficiency, but right now is an especially good time. This is not an easy economic environment for anyone, but the real estate sector is particularly suffering. And we think of that most often in terms of vacancies and the loss of rent money that landlords are experiencing, but it's also resulting in increased operating expenses for many of them. So with COVID having the need for increased cleaning protocols, that comes with increased supplies and labor. And with all of that, it leaves landlords looking for places that they can reduce operating expenses, and utilities are a big one there. And even though energy efficiency has been around for decades, there is almost always a lot of low-hanging fruit that you can still take advantage of to get some pretty big savings with pretty quick paybacks. So if you're walking into a conversation with your landlord trying to broach this topic, also recognize that they are probably under increased pressure from their investors, potentially from their employees, and most likely from their tenants, who are all asking them questions about what they're doing to address sustainability, and specifically how their assets, which are the buildings that they own and operate, are performing. And helping with that conversation, yet another angle, state and local governments are passing at an unprecedented rate local legislation that requires buildings in some cases to perform at a certain level of energy efficiency, or at some other sort of prescribed metric, but that basically sets a standard for how a building has to perform energy-wise, and penalizes building owners in some cases pretty heavily for not reaching that. So in many of those cases, they are really looking to tenants and to partnership with tenants to help them reach those goals, because they can only do so much in terms of the efficiency of the structure. They also need tenant cooperation and participation to operate in a more sustainable manner. We go to the next slide. I tried to put in here some sort of action-oriented suggestions for you for if you have the opportunity to negotiate a new lease, if you happen to be at that point in your business cycle. That's the best point at which to get clauses into the lease that would hold your landlord accountable for the energy efficiency of the equipment and the operation of the space, and to really assert some of your own goals and needs, and to have those addressed through the lease. Even if you are not at that point, since that doesn't come around very often, you can still use the lease as a reference point for discussion with your landlord, and you can do plenty of things outside of the lease as well. So these are some clauses you might want to focus on if you are going to base your conversation in the lease. But if not, you can also talk about things that are just best business practice, like sustainable purchasing, purchasing from more environmentally and socially mindful vendors. And then data sharing and reporting is another sort of operational best practice, but there's often a great asymmetry of information between the landlord and the tenant, and sometimes that revolves around the energy expenses and the utilities. So at minimum, you want to make sure everybody's operating with the same data and information about the space's performance, so that you have a good starting point for addressing improvements. And one way to bring information and opportunities to light is through an energy audit. So I'd always recommend, if you haven't had an energy audit done, or your landlord hasn't had one done, to go ahead with that first step. The Energize Delaware program, which you all are probably familiar with, does offer energy audits for commercial and residential buildings. So that energy auditor will come in and identify what measures could be put in place in your building to save energy, and they'll estimate the payback period for those, which is what your landlord will be wanting to know. If I make this investment, how soon am I going to accrue those savings back through reduced energy bills? Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So again, you can negotiate things in your lease, but you can also, regardless of whether you're using your lease, you can use this as an opportunity to have a conversation with your landlord around shared sustainability goals. So we worked with a coffee shop that was actually on the Case Western University campus. The coffee shop wanted to do a lot in the way of sustainability and energy improvements. They're getting pressure from their employees who are students, from their customers who were students and very environmentally minded. They were having a hard time getting the university to kind of move and make investments. The university was their landlord. But most large landlords, certainly universities, have sustainability plans and goals. And the coffee shop, one thing that they worked in was they said, we want to be part of your sustainability plan. So they didn't change their lease. They just said, make us part of your plan. And we want to see every year how we're performing on energy and where we fit into your recommended capital improvements that you're making as a university. So that also got across the benefit to the landlord. And then again, Energize Denver, I was looking through and had some pretty great incentives and other programs that landlords can take advantage of. It's often not super easy and straightforward to navigate those. So you can do your landlord a favor if you come to the table with a little bit of homework having been done and a little bit of background. And I know there are folks in that program that are eager to engage and provide their assistance too. So that's one way that you can be helpful. The thing that you're really trying to accomplish in any of these discussions is, as with any communication, is just to align around common values and priorities, and then on the economic front to align around the incentive, so that you've probably heard of the split incentive referred to when talking about energy efficiency. If you pay the utilities, which if you have a net lease, a double or triple net lease that's common in multi-tenant buildings, you might be paying the utilities. Your landlord pays the cost of capital upgrades to put more efficient equipment in. They're not super motivated to save you money on your energy bill when they're going to be putting in the cost of the improvement. But there are ways to share in that cost of benefit and to overcome that. And it's been done many, many, many times over. And because of the pressures I was describing earlier, landlords have an increasing openness and appetite for finding those sort of shared solutions. The last thing I'll leave you with in the next slide is just some tips. So I talked about several of these. Again, always start with an energy audit. In terms of information gathering, if you can get your landlord to install a sub-meter for your space so that you know exactly what energy your space is using and you can monitor and track to that, that's also helpful. One that is not on here that I learned about from the Green Building United chapter in your region is a voluntary benchmarking program that they started right when COVID hit and are going to kind of restart, because for obvious reasons it sort of fell by the wayside. But that's a program where you can work with your landlord with the support of the Green Building United staff and some local partners to benchmark the energy performance of your building and of your space. And it's just another way to kind of have an activity to work with your landlord around to bring transparency and information to the forefront so that you can start tackling efficiency from a point of mutual understanding. That's all from me. I'll turn it over to Stacy to talk more about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Halliday. I'm coming to you from Bangkok. I'm an environmental attorney, as Alan mentioned, specializing in environmental compliance and sustainability and environmental justice. So I'll speak to you today about diversity, equity, inclusion, with a few touches on the growing topic of environmental justice from the small business, from the sustainability perspective. So what do these terms mean? If you don't mind, thank you. What do these terms mean? They're pretty difficult to nail down. These aren't, I mean, we hear them a lot, but how do we actually operationalize them and think about them in concrete ways? So provided these definitions that were put together by the UC Berkeley Center for Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity and the University of Houston Center for Diversity and Inclusion, which I think is it's a helpful baseline to start our conversation on DE&I. So diversity, I think, can think about it as creating a workforce of, in the small business context, creating a workforce of people of varied backgrounds. Now, be broadly defined, we can be talking about more traditional categories of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, but we can also be talking about gender identity, religion, education, veteran status, language. I think this is important to think about when being broad about diversity and thinking about the value that a diverse workforce brings. It's not just about more traditional concepts, but about the value of having this group of diversified perspectives. So other important things to think about when we're just thinking about the term diversity, I think, is that it's relational. A community is diverse, not an individual. So it's really, again, about that interplay of different perspectives and also recognizing intersectionality. Individuals are complicated. We're all complicated, right? It's individuals are multifaceted. So we can be veterans and be minorities, and that's all something that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about building diversity, equity, inclusion programs and how you approach your workforce. So inclusion, I thought Vernee Meyer's quote here was actually a really fun way of thinking about it. Diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. It's great to have a diverse workforce, but what's really important is making sure that all the individuals in your company, particularly those in historically marginalized groups, are involved in the processes, the activities, and the decision-making endeavors at your business that empower and provide access to those opportunities and resources. These, I think, work hand in hand to really make an effective D&I program. And then finally, equity. This is a term of growing common use now. I think it's growing in popularity, and I think it's a new addition to the D&I conversation, but it's a really important one, particularly someone like myself who does a lot of environmental justice work, because it captures the overall theme of what D&I efforts aim to achieve. So ensuring fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all, including by eliminating barriers to participation. We'll touch a little bit on this later in my remarks just about EJ. So if we could jump to the next slide, please. So why do we care? What does DE&I have to do with your business, and what does it have to do with sustainability? So besides diversity for diversity's sake and the inherent value of an equitable diverse workforce, there's really a strong business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we've seen companies large and small that invest in DE&I see greater financial returns, more revenue from innovation, and they recruit and retain better talent. McKinsey's 2020 report, fittingly titled Why Diversity Matters, concluded that companies in the top 25% for racial and ethnic diversity are 36% more likely to show financial returns above the national industry median. And on a broader scale, and I see this a lot with my clients, larger companies, we're increasingly seeing sustainability frameworks and best practices highlight the benefits of diverse, inclusive, and equitable environments for employees to build sustainable and profitable companies. The US Chamber of Commerce concluded that diverse and inclusive businesses outperform their homogeneous competitors, particularly with innovation, employee retention, talent recruitment, profit, and other key business metrics that lead to long-term growth. We also see leading sustainability metrics, a Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, SASB. Their materiality map lays out important sustainability-related business issues, including diversity and inclusion. And the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance mentioned that diversity and inclusion was the most prevalent sustainability ESG metric. So we're seeing on a macro scale the importance of DE&I, not only to investors for larger companies, but to companies of all sizes for long-term success, resilience, and sustainability. And this is, I think, especially important as we have this conversation in the midst and hopefully towards what will be the end of the COVID pandemic, having the benefits of diverse perspectives and talents to build innovative solutions and resilience needed to survive this market. And flag, and we'll talk again a little bit about this more in detail later, but just that environmental justice, though it's a topic I think unto itself and a little adjacent to DE&I, embeds and I think has some helpful themes in terms of fair treatment and meaningful engagement. These are key themes for environmental justice and are important about thinking about how your company impacts your neighbor and community and developing a corporate culture that values inclusion and a workforce that reflects your community to help build local support, avoid opposition, and ensure the long-term success of your work. So bottom line, embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion to the bedrock of your company makes you more resilient, more profitable, more innovative, and more attractive to customers, employees, and investors, especially for small businesses that are closer and engage more with their communities. Can jump onto the next slide, please. So how do we incorporate DE&I into our work? So we'll start from the beginning with recruiting with diversity in mind. I think investing in partnering with pipeline programs that support and produce diverse candidates is a helpful way to begin to work from existing pipelines, to work from existing structures, especially if you're starting from the ground up with your diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. If, I think as part of that, while you're doing that and while you're finding those sources of where to find candidates that are, that bring more diversity to your workplace, it's also important to think about how your current recruiting and interviewing and hiring practices are built, and to root out and diagnose any inherent bias or subconscious bias from that process. In addition, I think it's important to go beyond industry defaults for hiring qualifications. Ask yourself, what does the job really require? Are we just defaulting to the same traditional requirements that have inherent biases that eliminate diversity in a meaningful way? And to do that, I think it's also helpful to remember that numbers don't lie. Use metrics to assess your hiring practices over time, and then root out otherwise unforeseen bias that would be hard to otherwise identify. Now, building an inclusive workplace, this is something as you're developing that pipeline of candidates to diversify your employee base and your company, also thinking about what everyday business practices do you have that might make it more difficult for new employees who make up your diverse workforce to embed and engage with your community, with your company. What internal accountability measures can you develop, and points of contact for DE&I can you put into your company to ensure that your employees feel that they have a way to be empowered, to be engaged, to engage with decision making, and develop ways that you can communicate about DE&I goals internally and provide avenues for feedback. It's particularly important here to have people who own and invest in the DE&I program at your company to be clear points of contact, to own and have accountability for DE&I goals, and to make sure that these goals are being measured and enforced within your company. And finally, just being a good neighbor, as is the do unto others, I think, principle that I see a lot in my work with EJ. And this is sort of my extra 2 cents as someone who spends most of her day thinking about these topics. But being a good neighbor is really key to the overarching concept of EJ, which centers on the concepts that I mentioned of fair treatment and meaningful involvement, particularly of vulnerable communities in the broader EJ context. But I think for small business purposes, just thinking about your communities. With EJ, specifically with respect to environmental impacts, but I think when we think more broadly about your impacts, environmental, social, economic, and how you engage with those communities in a meaningful way to help your business, but also to become more embedded in your community. So I think EJ for many of my clients is a significant and growing priority, not only because it's very much a priority for the Biden administration, but because they realize that it's important to consider impacts on neighboring communities, to build that local support, to help the community understand the work and the importance of the work, to avoid any kind of opposition because of that understanding, and to ensure long-term success of their company. So just, I think from environmental justice, we can get some helpful themes for your work. Do your research and get to know your neighborhood. That's really most effective when it's engaging and listening to communities. So cities like Wilmington, majority, minority, and incredibly diverse communities, learn about the history of that community, understand where you fit into that history, and engage with the community and listen, understand what the needs of the community are, and work that into the ethos and the thoughts of your company and your business to the extent you can. There's also, I think it's called ground truthing, I think, is taking the data that you have and actually going on the ground and talking to communities, but also using data tools like EJ Screen to help you get a sense of just the general broad strokes of your community is a helpful starting point for those who want to take a deeper dive. I think also understanding the impacts of your business, as I mentioned, it's environmental, social, and economic on your community, can be a very important starting point for how you engage with communities and how you think about your business and how you shape your goals to ensure that you're not taking steps that might be counter to what the community's interests are, or hopefully aligned with the interests of the community. So I think finally, third, a good way to streamline these efforts is to hire locally and invest locally. Think about hiring in your community. I'm sure that a lot of your businesses involve direct interfacing with community, and getting local support would be a helpful asset. So hiring locally is a great way to do that, to learn more about your community, to have folks who are on the ground and understand it firsthand, and having them inside your company is a fantastic way. We tell our clients all the time to do that. And it's a really wonderful way to not only get closer to the community, but to support it. And finally, go to the last slide, please. Just a couple of concrete takeaways to think about, just setting actionable goals. As I mentioned, appoint a diversity champion. You can create employee resource groups. This is a great way to develop inclusion, to give your folks somewhere to go, a sounding board, and a place to elevate any issues that they might have. Implement trainings. D&I trainings are very helpful, but ensuring that they're structured in such a way that they're well shaped for your company and for your workforce. Look at the numbers, establish ways to measure pay parity practices, diversity in leadership, as I mentioned, your recruiting practices and general business practices to root out any bias. Engage and partner with diverse groups of business partners, as well as pipeline programs that can help bring a more diverse community to your workforce. Create a D&I community, and of course, getting into the community, understanding local campaigns, activities, social movements that are important to your employees, your community, and that generally support inclusivity are really helpful ways to just start this journey if you haven't yet started. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks. I'll turn it over to Jamie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stacy, and thank you to John and Julie as well. Joel and Alan are on the call, and they can answer any questions that you have about the Green Street USA program. But we did want to share with everyone on the call today that Green Street USA does have a program to help you with your sustainability efforts. And as you can see on the screen, there is a monthly subscription. And for a limited time for everyone on the call, if you are interested in working with Green Street USA, they are offering limited time introductory pricing. And if you are a Newcastle County Chamber of Commerce member, they are offering an additional discounts, which is a wonderful opportunity for all of our chamber members to be able to utilize to get on the road to sustainability. We are also thrilled that the SBDC is also partnering with us to help you get on that road. And we have Danita and George on the call. Thank you so much, Danita and George, for all of your help and assistance with this. And so the SBDC understands that businesses may need some additional help in getting it onto the road for sustainability. So they are providing an additional $500 for chamber members for this program. So if this is something that you are interested in, with all of the discounts, it ends up really being almost half price for chamber members. And if you aren't a chamber member, consider becoming a chamber member, because you're actually going to save money in the end, because most of your organizations on the call have lower amounts of employees, and really it is a savings in the end if you are interested. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan. I know he's been watching the chat, and also if anyone has any questions about the Green Street USA program, he can also offer some more information on that as well.
Great. Jamie, thank you very much. And thank you to all the speakers, really fantastic practical tips and insights. There's actually one question here. We have a few questions, see what we have time to get to. But this one question I think I'll pose to each of the panelists, because I think it applies to all of us. If you were to recommend one thing to get the ball rolling so that we can reap the benefits, what would that be? I mean, it's an excellent question, and I think all of us face this challenge that sustainability can be such a broad and almost intimidating topic because of its breadth, because of its depth. Small, medium-sized businesses do need, all businesses need that practical first step to really initiate their journey. So maybe I'll just go through ask each of our panelists to, in a nutshell, offer one or two insights on that first step. Maybe start with John.
Sure, thanks, Alan. Well, for me, and coming at it from a risk and resilience context, it would be just taking a small amount of time just to think through what are the things that could happen to your business, what are the unexpected things that could happen, what would happen to your business if they did, and just how could you, mitigate the effects of that, avoid it. It's just to engage with the management team, to just get their perspectives as well. So it's just putting a small amount of time, effort in, just to think about the unexpected, what could trip your business up, what could help it, and just make sure that you've got actions in place that can minimize that or maximize the opportunity if it's something that can really help drive your business forward. So just invest that time. It doesn't have to be much.
Stacy?
I think from the DE&I perspective, it's really, I think the inclusivity part is really one of the largest issues. I think if you build that inclusive workplace and you assess where in your current practices and your governance and the way that your company works, where those inherent biases might be that might isolate or exclude or limit your ability to have a diverse workforce is the first step. It's really, if you build it, folks will come model. So I think looking at where you are, examining parity issues and equity issues internally, getting that diagnostic assessment of your company, looking at the numbers, diversity in your company, it's a really good place to start. And I think that will tell you the story for where you really need to go and what you need to shape a more inclusive company.
Thank you, Stacey. We'll go to Julie, and then I know Danita wants to weigh in on this question as well.
Sure. I would say with energy efficiency, a big piece of the ballgame is just figuring out where you stand. So collect as much information as you can about your consumption. Look into that voluntary benchmarking program if you want to work with your landlord to figure out how your building's performing. Get an energy audit, and then try to, as with all sort of big, hairy things that you want to tackle, just make a plan with your landlord about how you can reduce that consumption. And one suggestion I didn't mention earlier, but if there are other tenants in your building, some small businesses have had success by kind of banding together with some of the other tenants, and then as a group going to their landlord and asking for some action and investment collectively. So that's another one.
Great, thanks, Julie. Danita?
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm just weighing in from the broader standpoint. I would say the biggest step you could take is to find a partner or some help so that you can start this journey, right? And so the reason that we partner with the Chamber and all the experts here today and Green Street USA is so that we can give you that tool or that partner that can start you on that journey so you don't have to go it alone. And so when we get a chance, we'll talk more about what the Green Street USA platform has to offer. And it really does make some of what you heard today very actionable. And so I would say first step is partner up with the resources that are here today and take advantage of what's being offered, and that will get you started on your journey.
Well, I'm not going to pass up that segue. So thanks for that. And if we can move to the next slide, sort of, I think it's our final slide, and just to follow that lead from Danita. So listen, as I hope and I trust that our attendees appreciated from today's discussion, sustainability as an umbrella concept, it involves a lot. We've focused on three very critical and timely topics today, but recognize that it's a broader topic. And in a nutshell, again, it goes back to that definition I offered at the outset. A sustainable business is one that plans to be around for the long term, and deservedly so. And we've put together this program really based on tried and true and proven principles of how to build and execute a sustainability program with the needs and profile and resource structure of small and medium-sized enterprises. And we've created a program that we're referring to as our STEP program, allowing our subscribers to step into sustainability with a strategic initiative, an opportunity to look in the mirror and identify what those priorities should be, what goals should be set, what are the first steps that can be taken in the overall threat and opportunity that is sustainability, to harken back to some of what John was talking about. But then you need to identify those practical steps, those practical actions, and that's where our tactics come in. We have monthly bulletins, regular webinars like these, where we're offering ideas and concepts and examples and stories of what peers have done, what businesses are doing, what are based on the strategic plan you've put together with the help of an advisor and one-on-one consult. What are those steps that you can take at a practical level? And the third step, and these are all interconnected. They're not sequential necessarily. They're all they all work together holistically. But the reporting, so taking a strategic plan and using that as a living and breathing document for your business that drives your engagement, drives your action. And then at year end, to develop the sustainability, will help you develop a report, a reflection on how you did, what went well, what went wrong. These are not linear exercises. They're ups and downs, and that's just par for the course of what a sustainability journey looks like. But we'll help you develop those reports and reflect and plan for the future, and continuously improve. And then, of course, and this is a critical aspect, what we call promotion, but it's about marketing and embracing and communicating what you're doing. Customers are asking, employees are asking, community leaders are asking, the world is asking, what are we doing as a private sector, as a business sector, to embrace and embed sustainability? And our program allows you to shout it out. We'll provide you with window decals and web badges and support your social media engagements to really help promote, not only for yourself, but for your entire community and your competitors and the entire sector, how businesses are, how you and others are embracing and implementing sustainability and progressing on this journey. So that's what our program is about. Jamie mentioned the opportunities that the Small Business Development Center has kindly offered, and we're so thankful for the support, and we're happy to engage. There's if you want to tease one other feature of our program, if I have 1 minute, Jamie, if you could go to the last slide. Yeah, so this is some of you have saw the reference in the invite to this program for a sustainability speed report. And this is an opportunity to take that initial review, to hold up the mirror and say, okay, how am I doing? And through a simple survey that is free for all, of course is included in the subscription membership, you can literally in 5 minutes take an assessment and see how you're doing yourself using the speedometer tool, and also compare yourself to your peers, how others are doing. And again, we'd encourage you to obviously subscribe, but also please certainly feel free to take advantage of that survey link. And if you don't have one, reach out to us. So thanks for that. With that, I will wrap it up, and we look forward to seeing businesses all over the area initiate and progress on their sustainability journey. So thanks very much, and have a great day.